Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in today's video, we're doing a What's New in Fusion for July 2026. I feel like we just did a What's New video for Fusion, but it updated on the 6th, which was yesterday, and there's a lot that has changed. So in this video, we're going to cover a lot of the key points, and I'm not going to get into CAM or the electronics or really any of the AI tools in this video, but I'll talk about a lot of that has changed. As with all of these, you can go to the help menu and see what's new if you've updated. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them under this video. If you want to see more on the stuff I'm not covering, I'll do my best to cover that in a future video. But first, let's get started. With most of the updates to Fusion, performance is mentioned. Now, there's not really a good way for me to measure this. I personally don't feel like the performance has really gotten better. If anything, with the introduction of the CE hubs and the push for the Home tab, I feel like it's gotten slower. I would love to hear feedback from you all in the comments. I do contract work for Autodesk, and I've spoken to people about this, and I don't really have a good way to quantify it. I just know that things do not feel faster. Things like opening documents, expanding the data panel, things like that. So I'd love to just get feedback in the comments, your own personal feedback if it's gotten better or worse, if you're on a Windows or Mac system or whatever the case might be. So again, I'm not really covering that, but there are a lot of claims about things like closing being faster or importing step files being faster, things like that. All right, so let's get on to what's actually changed. So one thing that I think is actually pretty big and important is we can now move document tabs around. That's something that might seem silly, but something that has been kind of a pain. I wish that the documents that are not active maybe had a little bit more of a division here. They do when you hover over them, but all of these documents here can be dragged left and right. Of course, when you've got too many here, you do have a drop down and you can see all the ones there, but being able to drag them left and right is pretty nice. Another big thing, which I did not see mentioned in the What's New document, is there is an option now when you hit the plus button, when you create a new document, to automatically use your default setup for the document itself. So whether it's hybrid design or part or assembly, you now have that option if you go into your user preferences to create a new document with the default design. So in my case, I have hybrid set to my default. This means when I open up Fusion, I automatically have a hybrid document. Now when I hit the plus button, I automatically have a hybrid document as well. While we're in here, I'm going to talk about the next update, which is the View Cube. Now, honestly, this one kind of struck me as is a little bit of a weird one. The View Cube is now able to be resized, and that option can be found here inside of your user preferences. It can also be found from this drop down here. But what I don't understand is, to me, the large and the automatic are the only usable sizes. So look, if I click tiny, what the heck am I going to do with a View Cube that size? And I can barely even find the little button to click on it to expand this menu. Small, maybe you could use this. I don't know why you would need it this small. And if we go to the View Cube size to normal, this one I can see is usable. I don't think it really needs to be much smaller than that. And then the View Cube size large. It's strange. This is actually large and automatic are different sizes. So automatic is like 75% of the way to large for some reason. So I could see normal and large both being usable. I just don't know why you would need small or tiny. They just, in this case, I'm not running like a 4K display. I'm running a 1080 display. And for me, I don't know. That just seems like those sizes are not very useful. But that's something that has changed. That's an improvement. The next thing that has changed is sketch visibility. So if you're running a dark theme or really any theme at all, what you're going to notice is that the blue color is different. It's a little bit more vibrant, I guess, so you can see it a little bit better. So if you happen to be running a dark theme, so if we go to environment and I'll just go to dark sky, it's a bit easier to see now. I still don't run the dark theme in Fusion. In most of the cases for CAD, I tend to still prefer a light theme. In Fusion, I still don't think the dark theme is fully sort of up to pace. And so I don't use the dark theme in Fusion right now. But if you do, that blue change is helpful there. I use the default background, the white background, and the blue does pop a little bit better. It's just a tiny change, but something that is helpful. What I will say is I would love it if this was configurable like it is in Inventor or AutoCAD. If you could just control what the color of these elements were, if you could pick what your line colors would be, that would be amazing. But right now we don't have that control. We've got this. All right. Next thing, refreshed home. Now, if you've seen any of my videos on what's new or anything in Fusion, you'll know that I don't use the home tab. The home tab has gotten a refresh. Depending on your license type and the access you have, you'll see some different stuff that goes on in here. They're really pushing for more of an environment that's not just accessing your design. So for example, these new buttons here for starting a new design, a new hybrid design, all these whatever. If you click new design, it brings up the dialog where you can pick part, assembly, and all that stuff. You'll probably see some buttons at the top if you are new to Fusion, if you're on a trial license. There's also some things like self-paced learning at the bottom, tutorials, forums, the App Store, those kinds of things. Now, some of my gripes with the home panel or the home experience, one is performance. And so, for example, if you click on something here, that automatically opens the design up. If you want to view properties of it, you need to click the checkbox, and then you can expand things like the properties. If you just happen to click on it, it's going to open it. And I think that I mean, I kind of understand maybe why that happens, but I don't really love that. I wish that the display by default would open up to projects instead of my Fusion. I think that might be better, but I just still have some potential issues with this. Now, if I click on something here, again, it's going to automatically open up. If we look at the time it takes now to open this design, this was the recent Surface Mastery video that we did. The amount of time it takes to open and close this seems to have gotten slower. Now, that's true for the data panel as well as for that home experience. I am on a CE hub, a collaborative editing hub, and so that's something to keep in mind. I don't see any performance benefits. When I go into the data panel and I look for this design right here, I can just right click on it. I can do all kinds of things like create share links. I can look at the history here, which is now independent of the design if you're on a CE hub. I can also open it from here. I can see a thumbnail preview. And if I click on it, it doesn't automatically open. I have to double click, or I could drag it into a design. I just think the functionality in that data panel, for me, seems to be a little bit better. And so if you like the home panel, that's great. You can certainly use it. If you don't, they took away basically the automatic thing that happened when you closed all your tabs. It went to the home. They fixed that in the last update. One last thing I'll say that does kind of irk me about the home panel is that once you're in here, you can't go to the data panel until you go back to a design. And once you're back in a design, then you can access the home panel. And so, for me, again, I don't really think that it's the best solution for my workflow, but again, it may work perfectly well for other people. Okay, let's talk about some other updates. There is a new update for share link for a specific point in time. I have not personally gotten this to work, and I'm not sure if it just hasn't rolled out to everybody. So if you're on a collaborative editing hub, you may or may not know this, but you now have to right click and go to history. There are other ways to get to this. This is only one of them. And the history is what we used to see in the data panel under the version dropdown. You used to see all the versions that were here. Now it's called history. There's no more milestones. If you want to create what used to be a milestone, you have to create a version. So that is essentially replacing milestones. And you're supposed to be able to create a share link for any of these saved points in time. I've opened these designs. I have tried to create a share link. The share link still says share the most recent copy. So I haven't personally gotten that to work. If you have, please let me know. I just can't get that to work. So I'm not really sure what the issue is there. Again, maybe it hasn't rolled out to everybody. One just other point talking about data panel hubs and all that stuff. There is a new admin tool that can merge and update hubs. So if you have multiple hubs that you need to put together, there is a new admin tool that you can do that with. You need to be very careful. That is not something that you can roll back or undo. So if for some reason you need to combine multiple hubs together, I would dig deep into the options and settings there before you dive in. Both hubs need to be CE style hubs, collaborative editing hubs, and you need to be admin of both of those hubs to make that work. And with that in mind, CE hubs are pretty much rolled out to everybody or most everybody at this point. I've done a video on that in the past. I'm not going to cover it here. But if you are not sure if you're on a CE hub, then if you hit the save button and you don't see a description or create a milestone, then you're on a CE hub. If you still see that, that is one clear way that that can tell you if you're still on the older style hub. All right. There is a new tool here. I'm not really going to go over any of the AI tools. I'm a bit exhausted with AI tools at the moment, and so I don't really want to cover them in this video, but I will point it out. This is something that has popped up on this inspect menu, but it's part of the design extension. It's supposed to be able to find similar components inside of your data panel in your projects. I need to do a bit more digging on this tool and how it works. I don't personally love the idea of just sending this tool through all of my data in my data panel and trying to find similar data. I understand the reason for it, but again, I need to dig in personally a bit more into what this tool is and how it works. I don't currently have the design extension active, which is the tools that you'll find on this plastic. You'll also find some things like volumetric lattice, which got an update. It now has honeycomb added. You'll find a lot of these things with that little icon on them. They're all going to be part of the design extension, which again shows up as plastic. In this case, it shows up on this plastic menu. Most of the tools are for injection molding, but you will find a couple of them like the geometric pattern. You'll find that new tool for find similar components. And there are some other things that may pop up here and there. But again, I'm not going to cover it in this video, but find similar components is a new AI tool. There are a lot of improvements or changes to the Autodesk Assistant. There are changes to basically how deep the assistant can go into CAM and some other areas, simulation, for example. But again, not part of this video, but just note that that is a new tool. You may have seen that pop up recently for yourself. All right, let's talk a little bit about custom configurations. This is going to be a tricky one that probably needs a bigger video, but mainly when we configure designs, typically what we have are going to be designs that you build every configuration that you need. Custom configurations allow you to do this a bit different by selecting customized. And what this allows us to do is when we insert this into a new assembly, that customized option, and I'm going to go ahead and just, let's insert it. Let's grab this one. When you insert it here, it's not going to automatically create configurations, but it gives you options down here to pick through the various customized options you wanted. So you can pick which configuration you want, in this case, small or large, and you can configure other things like materials and appearances. I'm going to cancel that out because I'm not going to let it crank away and think, but that is a nice new update. Okay, the last thing that's going to be on our list for this video is going to be some updates to the construction geometry. Now, when I say construction geometry, I mean things like planes, axes, and vertices. There are a lot here. I'm not going to go through everything, but I just want to make a couple of mentions. The perpendicular plane, it's probably best if we create a new design. And I'll just make a cylinder here. Drag that up. All right, the perpendicular plane, this option now supports curved geometry. And so what you can do is you select a face and you can kind of pull this around. Now it's not just a cylindrical face, it supports all kinds of other geometry. From my initial testing, it doesn't support things like complex splines, but even complex arcs that are revolved, so sort of like a torus shape. It will support some of that stuff. And so that is a benefit. That's an update there. There are some new reference objects inputs for some additional controls, things like sketches and sketch profiles. One of the other things that I think is probably pretty helpful, I'm going to go ahead and create plane through 3 points here. Just grab one of these, is this offset option. And so a lot of times when we would create construction planes, it would be like an intermediate step where we would need to create a construction plane, then go back and create an offset from it. And so this new offset option, which isn't in all of the different planes, there are only certain ones that this will work for, but that new offset number can help save you a little bit of extra work from creating things like a secondary plane or a primary plane just to create an offset. In addition to that, there are some changes to this resize option. So if you remember a while back, I made an API script that was intended at going through and scaling up the planes based on selected geometry. Shortly after that, it was added here. Complete coincidence, it wasn't at all related, but it was added into the construction geometry creation. So the default is going to be slightly bigger than the object. And you also have this extended option, which will create it quite a bit larger. And so there are some back-end things that dictate what those sizes are. But just keep in mind that you do have those options there. So again, those are resize controls. There are just a number of little updates to these construction planes. Things like the axis perpendicular to a point can now accept the origin. So it can accept things like the origin point as an input for reference. A lot of these things we have kind of worked around and aren't necessarily a big deal, but things like the ability to resize the plane, this I think is really helpful. Obviously, I made the video on that API tool that I worked on just to make this happen. So I think that's pretty helpful. The offset value for some of these other plane types, things like creating a plane at an angle and then having this offset value here, instead of having to create those primary planes and then create an offset version of it. That's really helpful as well. So once again, if you want to see all of the updates, I do suggest going into the What's New document. There are a lot. I didn't cover some of the updates to drawings. There's updates to electronics, to simulation, to CAM. I did mention that there are quite a few of the updates to the Autodesk Assistant in the new edition of this Find Similar Components. There are updates to things like saving default threads in a thread library. All these different things, if you use those tools, then they're really helpful. What I find is that 99% of people don't. And so I try to cover just the core of these different tools. If you have any questions on any of this stuff, please leave a comment and let me know. If you are looking for content, I'm just going to start sort of plugging and reminding people that we do have learneverythingaboutdesign.com. We do have courses for sale, and we will be adding more courses to that in the near future. We have been working on several, and we're just doing some refresh on the website and another option, which I will share at a later date. So any questions or comments, please leave them on this video. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.